Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases. The content may be triggering or inappropriate for some audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm your host, Charnell Lennox, and with me in the studio is Megan. Hi, Megan.
Hello, Charnell.
How are you today, my friend?
It's a little bit cold. It's fall here. It feels like in Michigan now, but I'm doing great now because I am stroking our kangaroo scrotum.
Lucky kangaroo scrotum, as we do before every episode.
It feels full.
It does.
Yeah,
it does. Supple today.
Yeah, it's got all those little crystals in it.
Our good
Your
luck
turn
crystals.
to shake.
There we go. We're going to be off to a strong start today. I'm bringing you a real bummer of a case, but I was intrigued because everybody who is involved in true crime has heard of Jack the Ripper.
Of course.
Right? There's lots of podcasts out there that have done deep dives into Jack, and we don't really know exactly how many victims he really has.
She. I even read a book that said it could be female.
Yep, and I don't disagree with that for sure. But this case that I'm bringing you today is the Ripper-esque murder of 8-year-old John Gill.
Oh, 8.
Actually, he was 7. He was
make it better.
Well, he was a month away from being 8. So when you look up, and this is old-timey, so when you look up different information, some say 7, some say 8, but quite frankly, he was almost 8, and that's why people were just kind of rounding up. He was only like 3 weeks away from his birthday, unfortunately, when
this
all of
poor
this
baby
happens. Yes.
And when we're talking old-timey, how far back are we going?
1888.
Oh, that is definitely old-timey.
It is, and it is, just to give you some context here, everyone, from August 31st, 1888 to November 9th, 1888 is when the murderer known as Jack the Ripper would claim the lives of what we know of 5 women in various gruesome killings. So at this point in time, we are in Victorian society, essentially. Everyone is on heightened alert. This is ripping through the newspapers right now.
No pun intended.
Yeah. You're right. I didn't even mean to do that.
Is this literally an old-timey copycat murder?
Frankly, we don't know. We think so.
You be the judge.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm bringing it. There is still a lot of mystery surrounding Jack the Ripper. You guys hear the information and tell me what you think about it. If it was copycat or, quite frankly, was it he or she? Actual Ripper.
The Ripper.
Mm-hmm. So we're in Yorkshire, 1888. Now, John Gill was a happy little kid. His family was very well respected. They were in Manningham, which is a suburb of Bradford in West Yorkshire. He was said to be bright in school. He was popular with his peers. People called him Johnny.
Aww.
We know 1888 was the year that in this area, Jack the Ripper was butchering women, literally. It's quite gruesome, the details, which, just trigger alert, these very similar gruesome details. This is why it's being compared to Jack the Ripper for how this little boy
So if you don't like child
found.
cases and you don't like gruesome cases, then maybe skip.
Maybe this one's not for you. I won't go. I'm going to tell like what the autopsy showed and things like that, and it is gruesome, but we will not linger.
Thank you for the warning.
On those details. Jack the Ripper's last confirmed murder was only a few weeks prior to John Gill. Keep that in the back of your mind as well. And that person, that victim's name was Mary Jane Kelly, and her body was not just mutilated. It was utterly destroyed. If you don't know anything about Jack the Ripper, use your imagination for why they may have used that descriptor for him. I found just a couple of brief things here, trigger alert. Mary, for example, her flesh had actually been sliced away down to the bone. Her face was gone and her heart had been cut out.
Right.
So that is how they found her. And of course, they were highly publicizing all of these crimes. So Manningham at the time, very small community. It's less than 200 miles from London's East End. They were getting news of all of this stuff through the papers, even back in 1888. So let me take you to Thursday, December 27th, just 2 days after Christmas. There was ice everywhere. It had snowed. It's just very magically, the most wonderful time of the year, essentially. John Gill, his routine, something that he loved to do, was catching rides with the 23-year-old milkman, William Barrett. He was a well-known milkman in the area. He had his horse and carriage that was delivering milk to all the patrons, and he let little John ride along with him and help him every day.
Which is adorable. And
Yes.
at that point in time, things were safe. You knew your milkman just like you knew your neighbor. He was your neighbor probably. And so he'd wait until the milk guy came up to deliver milk, and he'd be like, I'm getting in.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd do his route
And
with him.
he would. And he was a hardworking little boy. He loved going and doing this. And he had to get up super early, which, back in the day, everyone got up super early. I mean, it's survival.
Right.
And then he would go back to the horse stables that that was actually owned. These horse stables were owned by William Barrett's employer. Okay, so he would go back to the horse stables and he would help out there. But let me just kind of break down for you what goes on.
Right, because now you have me thinking William Barrett's a suspect here.
Well, and he was for a while. We know that according to William Barrett, at one of these stops, either the stables or at Barrett's own home, the two had breakfast together. They had milk and some bread and milk. The thing is that the stables and William Barrett's home are only a short walk from John Gill's house.
Yeah, that makes sense. I almost wonder if William Barrett lived in housing that was maybe owned by his employer, being so
Probably.
close to the stables. That just seems legit for the time.
Yep, I would assume so as well. Typically, what would happen is that William Barrett wouldn't take his horse and buggy back to John's house to drop him off. Once he was done with his route and they went back to the stables to stable the horses, he would hang out and help out a little bit, but then he'd just walk home.
Sure.
Or if he went to William Barrett's house, same thing. He would just walk home from there. No reason to believe that he would be unsafe in any of this. We're talking like 150 yards away from his house. It's not, these people are neighbors,
And 7/8-year-olds were a lot more self-sufficient and working
In
and doing
1888?
chores.
Oh, yeah.
Than our 7 and 8-year-olds who are playing Minecraft.
Yep, absolutely. The other thing is William Barrett is from a respectable family. He had a young wife, and everyone went to church together. According to John Gill's family, they had no reason to ever worry about John being with William Barrett.
Okay. So we don't get creeper vibes
No,
here.
not at all. He was a simple and cheerful man. He was well-liked. This is William. He was well-liked. John really liked him. He had no problem with the 8-year-old keeping him company during his milk route. He was just a good guy. During school holidays, when John was off from school, he would spend more time helping William out. I think he just really looked up to him. William did not mind the company. So that morning, he woke up early. John Gill woke up early. He remarked to his sister that he was really looking forward to his cart ride with William Barrett. And he said that at first he had to go run an errand for his father. So Mr. Gill was a cab driver. And so John would have to go get his horses ready. This is 1888. So the cab is a horse and buggy. And he would harness the horses for his dad. And so he had to do that and be done and ready by the time William Barrett was coming by to pick him up to go on the milk route. So all that happens, and he leaves about 6:30 in the morning, waiting at the front door with his mom to jump into the horse and buggy with William Barrett.
This is adorable.
Yep. So he starts to walk out. John's mom realizes that it's actually colder out. It had snowed the night before. It's colder out than she thought. So she calls him back to get more of a petticoat on to keep him warm, gives him a kiss goodbye, and off he goes.
And this is it.
This is the last time that she sees her son. Yes. John and William Barrett arrived at the depot to load up the milk, where they were seen by several locals, and then they set off on his delivery route. About 3 o'clock that afternoon, Mrs. Gill came looking for William Barrett and saying, hey, where's John? He doesn't usually stay to help him from 6:30 in the morning until 3.
Okay, so we're talking after the route, and
Yep.
maybe he goes to his house to have breakfast. He's probably home by noon, by lunchtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Even earlier. typically. Yeah. So
and it's 3.
It's 3. Yep. So of course, William Barrett's like, I'm not sure. I have not seen John since 8:30 a.m. I dropped him off at Walmer Villas, which is just one stop shy of his last milk delivery.
And was that typical? Because before we said that he had usually dropped him off back to the stable or even at his own house and he would walk home, Johnny would.
I think that, they had already had breakfast. So I think that he just let John decide when he was ready to go home, when he was done helping him.
You know, and you did just say his mom even recognized that it was colder than usual that day. So maybe he figured he'd drop him off a little closer to home.
Right. Like here I am. And it's just one stop shy of his last delivery. There he goes. He said that John said that he wanted to go home for his breakfast. The last that William Barrett had seen him was he had went off sliding, so like skating on the ice puddles, down the street to the direction of his house, which was only 200 yards. So from his last delivery stop to John Gill's home is only 200 yards.
2 football fields away.
Yep. So he's like, yeah, no problem. You want to go home for your breakfast? Go ahead. And he did acknowledge that he had already had some milk and bread with the child.
Second breakfast.
Yes. But I mean, we're
a growing boy.
We're about an 8-year-old boy here, you know.
Well, and if
He
his
wants to go home.
parents were well off or at least making a living and well respected, maybe he was going to get more than bread and milk too. So
I'm sure.
Again, 8-year-old boy. You can never feed them enough.
Yes. And John Gill's family was said to be very well respected. I mean, I wouldn't call them upper class. This is like a middle class, type of neighborhood, whatever. But
they had means.
Yeah, I'm sure he was going to get himself some protein. And
right.
He's on Christmas break from school. And from what we find out later, his mom did expect him home for breakfast. So he had to get home. So then William Barrett said that he made his last delivery on the street, returned to the depot about 8:35 to load up with more milk to continue the next part of his delivery around 9 a.m. So it sounds like John, what I gathered from this is that John would accompany him on the delivery that was really close to his house and then go home and or help him, in the stables and things like that. And then he would go on to his next delivery. And like you said, it was cold. He probably didn't want to help anymore. Obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Gills grow very alarmed. They get help. They contact all the neighbors looking for their son. All the neighbors are helping look for him everywhere. And at 5 p.m., Mrs. Gill once again goes to see William Barrett as he's putting his horse away in the stables and thinking like, hey, have you seen him? I wondered if maybe he came back, here. He's like, no, I have not. Now at 10 o'clock, William Barrett and his wife went to the Gill house because they were worried and they just wanted to make sure that John had got home.
Yeah.
And they find out, no, he had not. It's 10 p.m. He had not returned home. William Barrett is really distressed, really worried because he is essentially the last person to see this child alive.
And he spends every day with this child. So maybe he wasn't as worried at first, but when it gets to the end of the day and the whole community, close-knit, tight neighbors, everybody knows each other, are all still looking for this little fella. He's probably genuinely concerned. I don't get a bad vibe right now.
No. His wife points out at this point in time, like, this isn't good because now he's missed his dinner, his lunch and dinner, presumably. And, for an
hungry 8-year-olds don't miss their dinner.
No, and he's cold. And so people are really growing worried. By Friday, December 28th, William Barrett came to Mr. and Mrs. Gill's house again at 6:30 in the morning, wondering, has John showed up?
Oh my God, can you imagine? He's like hoping, praying, maybe he's on the front porch waiting for him to go on his milk run.
Yep, and then they can have a conversation about not disappearing all day, right?
Yeah.
So they said no, and it was then that they decided, okay, we're going to, they had told William Barrett, the police are now on the case and looking into this, and there's detectives involved. And so he's like, okay, and he finished his milk rounds for that day. Mr. and Mrs. Gill did place an ad in the newspaper. I mean, 1888, man, that was the social media.
Interesting, though, that they did that. Basically, their missing persons ad went into the newspaper.
Yep.
So I'm glad they did that because we know still that we don't get advertisement for some children that are missing.
Nope. Yep. That's so true. This is what the ad said. Quote, lost on Thursday morning, boy, John Gill, aged 8, was last seen sliding in Walmer Villas at 8:30 a.m., had on navy blue top coat with brass buttons on, a midshipman's cap, plaid knickerbocker suit, laced boots, red and black stockings, and his complexion was fair. His home is at 41 Thorncliffe Road, end quote.
Like, please return.
Mm-hmm.
I can picture this cute little fella too.
I know, me too, so vividly. So the search for John went on all day. Many locals are joining in with the police search, of course, including Mr. and Mrs. Barrett.
Yeah.
Are looking for him too. At about 10:30 p.m., Mr. Barrett met up with Mrs. Gill and her friend, Mrs. Kearney. There was like kind of a change of tone at this point in time. This is the first time that Mrs. Gill kind of indicates to the Barretts that she no longer is buying into William Barrett's story about dropping John off at Walmer Villas. And Mrs. Gill told him that if he wouldn't say where John was, she'd have the detectives around the next morning to talk to him, which he's like, that's okay. I'll talk to the detectives.
And I don't blame her either, by the way.
No. At this point in time, all the information she has to go on is this is the last person to see my child alive, and we can't find him.
Right.
Saturday, December 29th, once more at 6:30 a.m., William Barrett came to the Gill's house asking, is there any news on Johnny? Mr. Gill observed that William Barrett had come along the street from the direction of the stables. And so after being told there was no sign of John, he continued in the same direction as if he was on his way home. This was just an interesting note that Mr. Gills made. Like, he didn't seem to come from his home. He seemed to come from the direction of where the stables were.
He didn't seem like he was on his milk road.
Right. At 7:30 a.m., a 31-year-old butcher's assistant named Joseph Beck, spelled buckle in some reports. Oh. So I'm not sure which one it
misprint in an 1800 newspaper and you have a new name.
That's right. That's where we're at. So it might have been Buckle. But he was seeing to his employer's horse at a stable yard that was accessed through a side street off from Thorncliffe Road. Okay, so Thorncliffe Road is where Johnny's family lives. Okay, so Johnny would have been on Thorncliffe Road to get home.
That's where he was sliding on the ice?
It was.
Okay.
And it's just 60 yards, this horse stable yard that's accessed by this side street from Thorncliffe Road is just 60 yards from Johnny Gill's home. And this is his own words. This is where I will give you a trigger alert here. In Mr. Joseph Buckle, we're not sure, his own words, says, quote, I am employed by Mr. James Berwick of the Market Hall in Bradford, who has a stable and coach house in Thorncliffe Road. I was there last night about 9 o'clock, but saw nothing unusual at that time. This morning I went into the stable, and after attending to the horse, I took some manure out of the yard in front of the coach house, where there is a manure pit. I had thrown the manure in when I saw a heap of something propped up in the corner between the wall and the coach house door. I could not make out what it was at the time, so I got a light and then saw a dead body. I just noticed, this as another trigger alert, because now we're going to get into a little bit of gruesome details. I just noticed that one ear was cut off and was alarmed and went for a man in the bakehouse. He saw the body and we went for a policeman together. We soon found one. I believe his number was 56. Police officers had numbers.
They did.
Their names. Yeah. He saw the body, and I then went for a doctor who came and also saw the body. I noticed that the body was tied up in a jacket or some piece of clothing with a leather belt strapped around it. I stopped at the place for some time and did not care to look at the body. I did not know that it had been cut up or injured. I left it in charge of the policeman, end quote. Now, the body was identified very quickly as John Gill, and his parents were informed of the discovery about 8:30 a.m.
Oh, those poor people.
Yep. By then, though, what's even worse is that John's younger brother, Sam, had already heard the news.
Rumor gets around in a small town.
Oh, yeah, because, of course, it's 1888, so there are people gathering around the crime scene.
Sure.
Immediately when they hear that there is a body, the people come a-calling, And the police officers just allow them to view in Rome.
Sure. There was no such thing as crime scene control, which is a real thing now. And I would assume, although he did not say it in his recollection of the events, that young man, Buck, that found him, you know this is a child. You know this is a small body that you've discovered.
Yep, most definitely.
If you're close enough to see that he's missing an ear, you know it's a child.
Yep, definitely. And I think that it was probably very traumatizing for him. And so he was just, this is what I'm going to say about this.
Right.
You know?
Forrest Gump. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yes, exactly. This is what I saw. And I got a police officer and someone else to come see. And that's that.
And he's outie.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give you the autopsy report.
All right.
But this is also a big trigger alert. For those of you that like the nitty gritty of true crime, you're really going to enjoy this part. If you're not, skip ahead probably about 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, that's me. I want all the facts. I want the science.
Yes, and there is a lot to
Give me the science.
Mm-hmm. So little Johnny's body was left face down. It was completely drained of blood and horribly mutilated. He had one ear was cut off and seemed to be missing. Both of the child's legs had been cut off at the thighs, but later reports would actually say this seemed to be expertly done and cut off like higher at the hip.
Ooh.
His legs that had been removed from his body were placed beside the upper parts of his torso. He had 2 stab wounds to the chest from a large knife that was deemed sufficient enough to have killed an elephant. So it was large blades, two wounds. It did miss his heart, but more than likely was the cause of death.
So we can hope then that, as awful as this sounds, the stab to the heart happened first because it would have been pretty quick.
They believe that all of the other wounds besides the 2 stabs were done posthumously.
Okay.
So he was already gone before being mutilated.
And when you say drained of blood, are we assuming it's because of the stab to the chest, or do you mean somebody expertly drained him of blood?
It was an expertly drained of blood.
Good God.
Not blood loss. There was no blood loss at the scene.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So he was placed there later. Mm-hmm. We know this now.
We do. Yep.
And he would have had to have been, if the amputations were expertly done in the way that, in the manner in which they preserved in the autopsy, then that was probably done off location as well. And just, he was placed here. Mm-hmm. He was set there to be found.
He was set there to be found and to possibly set up people too, is a theory here. So there was actually no injuries to his face at all. His throat had not been cut like across at all, like this way, like he had been, sliced across the throat. That where it happened was there was a deep vertical slash that began at his throat and went downwards to his lower abdomen.
Yeah, this is surgical style.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Now, his heart had been cut out.
Okay, so this is where the similarity to the Ripper is.
But then it was neatly tucked underneath his chin.
His heart. Mm-hmm. Now, the hearts on the Ripper victims were gone.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead.
And they also, though, weren't children.
Correct.
So sections of his intestines were also removed, and these had been draped around his head and shoulders.
Yes. Jesus.
The abdominal cavity was so clean that it appeared to have been washed out. Inside it, among other things, one of the things that were inside his abdomen were his boots.
What the fuck?
Exactly. They also found in his abdomen his missing ear and a severed lung. There was also severe genital mutilation. The entire scrotum had been cut away, and like several other of his organs were nowhere to ever be found.
So some are just missing, and some things are randomly tucked into his abdominal cavity.
Mm-hmm. Now, we don't have a clear exact time of death, but it was determined to be less than 24 hours before the body had been discovered.
So does that mean at the time that they were looking for him, he might have been kept someplace alive for a period of time?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because this is now 2 days later. So he went missing on the 27th. This is the 29th.
And they're saying 24, but our time frames aren't going to be that scientifically accurate
not
then.
in 1888. No.
And it's cold.
No. It is.
And so you're going to have frozen.
Things.
Yeah. All right.
Yep. Now, this is verbatim from the police report. And, all of my sources are in the show notes, but I used a lot of them for this case. There were 2 stab wounds in the chest, which included the area filled by the heart, but the stabs did not touch it. They didn't go through his heart. All the blood vessels were cut through, but the vessels which had been stabbed into was the aorta.
Yeah, that's instant.
There were certain parts of the body missing, a part of the iliac bone, part of the pubic bone on the left hand side, and the fleshy attachments. The knife shown to him by the police would glide into the wound on the chest, and any other knife of the same size would do the same. In his opinion, the boy was not murdered where the remains were found. Death would practically be instantaneous because of the division of the larger blood vessels of the chest. He was of the opinion that mutilations took place after death. The body was bloodless. It had the appearance of having been washed externally and internally, and then allowed to dry or drain. The mutations could not have been with one instrument. There must have been many sharp, strong knives and instruments used, well-tempered and perhaps with a point. Force would be required to sever some of the parts, such as could be applied by a mallet or hammer being struck on the back of the knife blade. There was no blood in the boy's clothing except that his collar was saturated with blood. A peculiarity about the collar was that the blood seemed to be much more moist than the body.
Really?
Yeah.
Like recent?
Yes. On the lining of the cap was coagulated blood. The body had been parceled up tightly with John's overcoat wrapped around the outside. The whole lot secured by string and John's own braces. He wore braces on his legs.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. They used to use those to correct some type of a foot issue or in step. So he had those little braces.
He did. Yep. His clothes were in a neat pile nearby. None of the clothing had cuts corresponding to the wounds, and it was concluded that John was at least partially naked when stabbed in the chest and mutilated. He
was taken. Mm-hmm. He was taken first and then undressed to some extent and then killed and then maybe undressed the rest of the way.
Yes.
Or he was completely naked when it happened and they, attempted to redress him.
Right. He had eaten currants and something containing them prior to his death. They could tell from his stomach cavities.
And do we know what he had for breakfast? Was it just milk and bread?
It was just milk and bread.
When he was going home?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So they're thinking that it's very possible that he was lured with food.
Sure.
To, wherever.
It's their version of the white van that says free candy on the outside.
Yep. Part of the body had been wrapped in a Liverpool newspaper with the name and address W. Mason, Derby Road, written on it. Efforts were made to trace W. Mason, but he was never found.
Like, was he a real person?
Yeah. I mean, it was addressed. The newspaper was addressed to that subscriber, essentially.
But they never found that person. I'd be checking out every doctor, surgeon, butcher, funeral home director, whatever, mortician, whatever they would have called them for the time. Like, those are the people who had the means to complete that type of a crime.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think. Or any of their assistants that had maybe been witness to any of these things. Yep, most definitely. So let's talk about the crime scene a little bit.
Yeah, because I want to know if there's potential witnesses out there too.
I know.
This happened during the day. He was at least taken during the day.
8:30 in the morning. William Barrett last saw him between 8:15 and 8:30 in the morning, people. On a crisp December morning.
Yeah, it's people are going to be out and about. They work, like you said before, they're up early.
They're working harder than we are now. I mean, my God, they literally to survive.
You only have until dark, right? To get all your work done.
Yep. So Dr. Samuel Lodge was present at the post-mortem examination, and he said regarding the severed ear that the operation was done as cleanly as if he had done it himself as a doctor. And he thought of all the other severed parts as well. It was of his opinion that John had been killed where the body was found, which seems really weird and kind of discredited him a little bit.
It should.
There was no blood at all found at the crime scene. So the police were like, with all due respect, good doctor, we professionally disagree.
And now I have concerns about him as a suspect.
Yep. And the police are like, it is far, far more likely. that this happened somewhere else and that this body was placed there sometime between late Friday night and the early hours of Saturday morning, because of the stable boy who found him had said, I was just here last night and nothing was here. And now here I am. Yeah. Inquiries were being made by the police, and they also established that the body must have been placed in that place between they think between 4:30 and 7:30 in the morning, because at 4:30, the constable on duty on a nearby street tried the doors of the coach house and stood on the very spot where John Gill was found.
Oh, somebody, this murderer was staking this place out to find the right place to dump him, and was paying attention to traffic and everything.
Yep. Because, here this constable he's doing his nightly rounds, right? And he goes and tries the doors of all the stables that are on his route. So he stood there right at the door, tried to open it, and it's obvious the child's body was not there at that point in time. And then it was, whatever time it was, 7 o'clock or so, when that stable boy then noticed him. So they were able to kind of narrow the investigation to, it had to have been sometime shortly after 5 o'clock, because between then and 5 o'clock, when the operatives that are employed in the various mills in the vicinity would be up and starting to stir. So after that time, a person carrying a large package, such as this was wrapped. I mean, he was wrapped like a package, right in with newspaper even, and his own petticoat.
And the belts, right? Yeah. To hold them all together.
Twine. It was described as being string, twine. Yeah.
I don't know why I had belts in my head, but yeah.
And so that time in the morning, it is still going to be dark, right? There's only lanterns for light, but somebody carrying a small package-esque like that may have gone unnoticed as they're going around their morning routine. It's probably not going to be, I think he's carrying a small child's body.
Well, and gruesome or trigger alert, remember, he's already been taken apart.
Yes.
So he's
even smaller.
Correct.
Essentially.
Or at least more compact for purposes of relocation.
Yep. There's another strange aspect to this, all right?
Stranger,
yeah. Several letters were sent to the police and the press prior to this fucking murder, claiming to be from Jack the Ripper, stating that he was done with London and he would now be starting north.
Fuck. And this is about, you said, less than 100 miles?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. From the last murder, known murder. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I have
you're all on my tail. You're catching all my murders.
Yep, I'm done in London.
I'm done.
I'm going. I'll actually read you one of the
good,
letters.
Please.
It says, "Dear Sir, if the Bradford police would like to make another gallant capture, now is the time. I have arrived in the town for the purpose of doing a little bit of business. Bradford is the field that requires my labor. Of course, knowing as I do that your men are so clever, it is not necessary to give my address, nor yet describe myself minutely. I will simply state that I am here alone, quite near to the town hall. I am, my dear sir, yours in the light against wickedness, J. Ripper. P.S. Perhaps you'd like my portrait, but you see, I am in deep mourning for those ladies that I put to sleep, and do not wish one to be taken."
Oh my God. So the newspaper that he was wrapped in, that Johnny was wrapped in, what newspaper was that again?
Mm-hmm. It was from a Liverpool newspaper.
Okay. So
not far.
He's in an out-of-town newspaper, though. It wasn't one from the town that he was in. So whoever wrapped him in this had a newspaper that was from out of town. And he made a comment in that letter about how I won't give you my address.
Yeah, because you guys are so clever, but I'm near town hall.
But there was a fucking name and address written on that newspaper, right?
It was, yes, which they went to follow up.
And they couldn't find the man.
They couldn't find that particular person at that address.
So, God, now you have me thinking this totally could be Jack the Ripper. He's been leaving little clues, and he's been, because he loves this.
He does.
This is what he gets off on.
He does.
He's killing these women, which I'm sure he enjoyed, as we are aware. But it's the chase. He wants to be chased.
Yes.
And he's given clues along the way.
Yep. And Bradford is not far from where we are at for John Gill's murder at all. Because you got to remember, each little teeny town has its own name. I mean, think about the town that we're in and then all the surrounding towns that are still in the same county. They're right next door. Right.
And our county's big, acreage-wise, and there are just a ton of townships and villages and a couple of cities. So, yeah.
Yes, and that's how it is, here. We are talking, not even many miles, right? So when he says that he's in Bradford, because he's got business at the town hall, this is very, very close to, forgive me because I have to scroll up in my notes to remember the cute little town name that we are in. Manningham. Okay. Yeah. So it's in Manningham, right? So
I'm just going off on my investigative brain then. So like I just said, I feel like this is totally a Jack the Ripper type of stunt in terms of what he's doing. But the MO is a little different, and we have the most different victim than we would have ever had. So this then leads me back to the fact that this could be a copycat or somebody using Jack the Ripper style stuff. His face wasn't ripped off.
No, his face was undisturbed.
And although he was, we'll say, ripped, for lack of a better term, there was a live autopsy and surgical experiment done on him. So there are some differences.
And I'm not aware of, correct me if I'm wrong because you've read a book on it. I haven't delved into Jack the Ripper, and it's so heavily covered by other sources that I don't know that I will. I mean, maybe you would want to sometime.
I would love to, but mine's a creative nonfiction too, and this was set up specifically by an author, and I wish I'll find it to give credit at some point in time, but summarizing or theorizing that it was a female, and so going through the whole thing like that she might have been the Ripper might have actually been an abused prostitute of some kind. And,
yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so but of course there's so much to go against that too, that just women are weak and we're fragile, and there's no way that somebody would have been able to commit those gruesome murders.
Never.
No. Our breasts would stop us.
They would. They get in the way from everything.
Right. So yeah, I feel like this is just a little bit different too.
Well, and forgive me because I don't know the details. Were there items found in the victim's body cavities?
No,
like
to my knowledge,
like
and I'm sure somebody will correct us if we're wrong. But I in all of my reading and just kind of general, pop culture, pulp, pop fiction type with this, I've never heard of anything being placed in the victim's abdomens of Jack the Ripper's victims.
I think that we have a copycat here that just took what was sensationalized news at the time and ran with that idea. There are several other letters came after the murder, too, that were specifically mentioning a boy and Bradford, but no details really. There wasn't any more details from the newspapers released at that time.
Were those signed from Jack R. also?
Yes. Yep, they were. The same person. Yep. Then there's also 2 months before the murder, and this was mentioned by the newspapers as well, that there was an occult group named Horus Temple that was associated with things like the Golden Dawn, and they operated in Bradford and had regular meetings at a local hotel. It obviously sparked a lot of speculation about occult involvement at this point in time. I get that.
I think that's another good theory if you're a good investigator, that all of that stuff has to be taken into consideration. And it certainly could appear to have been a cult style killing of some kind also, or ritualistic, I should state.
Yeah.
Is there something in that? And I haven't heard of those, so I apologize. I'll have to look them up. But would there be something about severing parts or placing things inside the body?
From my limited quick Google search that I did, yes, which is why it led them to believe that it could possibly. Also, from one article that I read, it was very common for them to have then placed their sacrificed victim out in the open to be found as part of the ritual so that that person could be properly mourned. It all had something to do with those particular rituals. So,
well, how nice of them.
Yes.
They just wanted to make sure that the body was returned so you could dispose of it in your religious method.
Yes, and it could pass through the right spiritual planes and yada, yada. I didn't delve too far. I didn't want to get too far off track because I felt the more I read about that, the more I was like, I could make a whole couple episodes on this alone. So I didn't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Right,
yeah,
exactly.
That's a future rabbit hole.
I always put pins in that stuff. And
yeah,
like,
my bunny tail's on
later.
And I'm ready to hop down it.
Yeah, that's what happened with Stephen Smith case when I found out about Barbara O'Hare.
Yeah,
like,
Aston Hall happened.
Yes, yep. We're going to cover her story, and that's how that all happened. So same thing here was like, and not all occult things are as scary and as media things make them to be too, but some of them are. So like we can't just discredit it. I think like you said, it all needs to be taken into account for the time. Now this is where it gets a little bit dicey. Because William Barrett was the last person to see this child alive, he immediately became the only suspect, really, and he was arrested for murder.
He's person of interest 1.
He was.
And they arrested him.
They did.
With what evidence?
By
you saw him
that
last?
stage, yes, the story had gone national and the police were naturally under a great deal of pressure to bring the culprit to justice, as we've heard time and time again.
Small towns aren't comfortable unless someone is in jail.
It's so true. You would know that more than anyone.
I do. Yep.
The arrest deeply divided the community between a minority who believed him to be a lunatic killer. There's only a small group of people that believed that William Barrett was responsible for this, and then the majority who thought that it was impossible that a man of such previously good character had committed this, not just murder, you guys. This is above and beyond murder. It's desecration.
Yeah.
That is so totally different than
butcher.
Just a murderer.
This is a butcher, a wannabe potential, either a serial killer or somebody who's starting off. Mm-hmm. That's where we're going with it.
And obviously had extremely dark desires to be able to, that got great enjoyment out of the mutilation, just as evidenced by putting, the ear in his abdominal.
And his boots.
His shoes. I mean, all of that is just like a mouse or a cat playing with a dead mouse, essentially. That's above and beyond just being deflected as a human.
But we
murdering.
also now know, from what we know, is anybody who's going to do that is going to be considered a sociopath. Mm-hmm. And so you have not told me anything about Mr. Barrett to cause me to believe that he's a sociopath in any way, shape, or form. And some of that's going to be seen either in nuances. We're going to get there, I bet. But I bet he has alibis for all this. He's married too. It's not like he's a single man who's just going to bring this child back to his home.
Yeah. No.
With his wife there and, carve him off.
With his housewife. I mean, she didn't have a job.
Of course not.
And so women can't work. We're far too fragile.
I mean, some days I feel like I am.
Right. Working or fragile?
Fragile.
Yeah.
Fragile.
So
I can't get up to go to work today. I must lay here and eat bonbons.
Fetch me some grapes. So William Barrett's supporters really helped with his legal costs, because there were so many in the town that were like, absolutely not. He did get a really good lawyer, and for his milkman's wage. So that's why it was like, oh, we know he's getting money from his supporters because he's not making this kind of money, being a milkman. The police really were very narrow-minded on Barrett. I mean, he seemed like the easy person. They did not expend a whole lot of resources and energy looking for alternative suspects, which is a problem.
It is, because the more time that goes by, the less likely you are going to find evidence or even additional suspects.
And you just get such a narrow focus on one man, you're missing everything else entirely. So Barrett's house and stable were thoroughly searched, and now there was nothing that was like, aha. There's no aha moment in anything that they found. But they did find, some things that are common for the times that you're going to find, like cloths that looked like they had been washed out with blood and hairs on them. Okay, he's a farmer. You're going to find that in my dad's house right now. He cuts himself repeatedly.
My dad was a butcher.
Oh, see? There you go. And like in this time, it's 1888. They're butchering their own animals.
They are.
To survive.
You work in a stable.
Yes.
You're dealing with injuries to animals as well.
Yep, exactly. They did go through his cutlery drawer until they found a knife that was big enough to have caused the deep chest wounds. But again, the times. You're going to find one of those knives in my butcher block right now, Megan.
Probably almost any kitchen in that town was going to have something that could have caused that type of injury.
Right.
And they weren't able to match specifics then.
No. And not,
or do DNA.
Not in 1888. Yeah.
Or do DNA.
No. So several locals came forward to say that they had seen John Gill with William Barrett more than an hour after he alleged to have dropped the boy off, while others reported strange sounds and oddly like late lights on at the stable where the horse and cart were kept. But again, this is all after all this information is coming out, right? So how credible are these witnesses at this point in time? All the information is being publicized. Like, we know that William Barrett is saying he last saw this child at 8:15. So then the witnesses who maybe did see them together that morning or any other morning that week, since
all
these
of a
kids,
sudden remember.
Yes. Nope. It was 9:15. I know it was 9:15 and I saw them together and I know it was on this day.
Those would have more credibility with me if they would have been disclosed prior to an arrest.
Right. Also considered as evidence was the fact that John's body was left at the stable only hours after Mrs. Gill threatened Barrett with a visit from the detectives. Which it's like, okay.
It's jumping a little.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder, is someone local, someone in town, someone who's listening and part of these discussions and maybe even part of the search?
Oh, yeah.
We know that happens.
You know they were a part of the search.
Oh, I do. I feel it.
Mm-hmm. So William Barrett, though accused of the most horrible crime imaginable and on trial for his life, he was very relaxed. He had a cheerful demeanor in prison, which his supporters saw that as him being optimistic because he was described as being a very cheerful and optimistic man prior to all of these events happening. But then the others who wanted to condemn him saw this as a clear sign of guilt.
Like, nope. You're happy?
Yeah. Yep. The police called him, said that he had an utter indifference to what was going on at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
He seemed to be genuinely concerned when they couldn't find Johnny.
He did.
That doesn't seem to be indifferent.
He came to Mr. and Mrs. Gill's house every morning until that child was found at 6:30 a.m., the same time he would typically be picking John up for the milk delivery, and checking in with them at night as well. Has he been found? Didn't see anything. Of course, this is 1888, so reports are shoddy, but I didn't see anything where it claims up until that one conversation where Mrs. Gill is with her friend there, and it's 2 days past, that she's like, you know what? I don't think I believe you anymore.
Right. You're the last one that saw my baby.
Yep. And it's clear at that point in time that he's gone, you know. So I think that she changed her tone a little bit because then she's like everyone else. It's like, well, we have no one else to blame at this point in time, right?
Right.
So
did he actually go to trial? Find out he was exonerated prior?
Well, I'm just getting to it now, actually. I will say, too, that Mrs. Barrett encouraged her husband to have a positive outlook, like, soon you'll be free. You know, he's trying to put on a brave face for his wife as well. The case against him was not strong. It was completely circumstantial, and due to the lack of physical evidence, the police requested 2 delays in bringing the case to trial so that they could get more evidence, right? After the second, because they had to do this twice, William Barrett was released from custody, only to be arrested again after a coroner's inquest named him as the killer. Huh? Like, I'm sorry, the coroner is like, I know that it was William Barrett.
Can you imagine how easy all of our cases would be if a coroner, if a medical examiner now would do an autopsy and say, and the defendant, the murderer is.
This feels like a game of Clue.
Right.
It was William Barrett with the knife in the stables.
Right. Or it like is magically written on like your liver, and once the autopsy is completed and you can see it. Yeah. Oh, there it is. It's been disclosed. That's ridiculous. This is all ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
He appeared before the magistrate in March 1889. There were few witnesses willing to speak against him.
Can I stop you?
Yeah.
Is this the coroner, is this the same person who performed the autopsy who said that he must have been killed there?
You know, it did not name this person.
Getting a bad feeling about him.
Right. That person was never looked into. I feel like that should have been the first person to be looked into, because why the hell are you claiming that this child was murdered here where there is absolutely no blood evidence whatsoever, and you are a doctor, so you have the means to do all of this. And
all of our spidey senses should be tingling.
Easily have the ability to so easily say, yep, it was William Barrett. Yes, indeed. So there were 47 witnesses available to speak in William Barrett's defense, and hardly anybody willing to speak against him in this trial. Mrs. Gill told the court that when Johnny hadn't come home for breakfast, she'd started worrying right away and asking around the streets whether anyone had seen him. But on cross-examination, both of Johnny Gill's parents admitted that their son never returned for breakfast when he was out with William Barrett, and that the boy was often out with the milkman for hours on end, so they wouldn't have had a reason at all for Mrs. Gill to immediately panic that morning. Now, this actually ends up working against Barrett, so the next logical question was why on that particular day and no other day Johnny had broken with routine by getting off the car early in order to have his breakfast at home.
Yep.
So there appears to have been no good answer for that other than, like you said, I think he got cold. It had snowed the night before. It's Christmas break
from school.
Yep. It's very possible that he was just tired of riding around with them. But fortunately for him, William Barrett's lawyer made short work of the police evidence with testimony from an old man living next to the stables who kept his lights on all night, which might have been mistaken for the property next door when they were like, hey, there's lights. There were lights on at William Barrett's stable all night. This neighbor testified, nope, those were my lights. Mine are on all night. He actually said that he also does stable work in the dark all night and that he had never heard anything unusual. This is typically when he would do his stable work. The blood stain and hairs were shown to be horsehair and dirt.
Makes sense.
Yep. And faded stains from old injuries that William Barrett had acquired at the stable. The one witness that was willing to speak against William Barrett said that they saw him carrying a parcel of clothes through the village at a time when he was actually elsewhere, and one of the other witnesses had proven that he was elsewhere. So
she conveniently sees him carrying a parcel of clothes when he's at work.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes, exactly. When they're like, wait, nope, because he was here at this time doing this, because they were trying to allude to the parcel of clothes being the body.
Yeah, I picked up on that.
So after 2 arrests, an inquest, and a trial, the magistrates declared that no case could be made against William Barrett, and amid a round of hearty applause from the public, he walked away from the court a free man. He did move from Bradford away back to his hometown, where they basically threw him a parade.
Okay.
Nobody believes that it was this man. As more information.
What is the saying? Live your life in such a way that if somebody says something bad about you, they have no reason to believe it.
Yes, exactly.
That
which
was
I
him.
think was him. I mean, he's a 23-year-old boy with a young wife and his whole life ahead of him, As more information on the case came to light, it became more obvious that the police had railroaded Barrett and that they came under even heavier criticism when it was revealed that they'd suppressed a witness who actually heard John telling William Barrett that he was going home for breakfast, and also hidden the milk delivery books, which had shown exactly where Barrett had been at 8:30 a.m. and for several hours after.
The police did this?
The police did this because they were under such criticism to get somebody behind bars for this child's murder that they literally were like, yep, we're just going to wham, bam, thank you, ma'am.
Are they under criticism, which is one theory, or are they in on some type of a cover-up with their autopsy expert, their coroner? I have a bad vibe.
I don't know. I'm with you. I'm not feeling the 1888 vibes here.
Especially because even then, law enforcement has a job to do, and we both respect that greatly.
Yep.
So the fact that was the entire police force just ready to be done with this and railroad this guy, or was there something going on?
And how big is their force?
2?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Members of the press were, not kind about all this, about how the police came to completely miss all kinds of things, including a set of muddy footprints that were still visible in March 1889, leading back and forth from the site of the body to the backyard of an empty house nearby.
No shit.
Yeah.
So 3 months later, because the snow is presumably melting, there are footprints.
There are muddy footprints. There is an abandoned house that is nearby, and there are footprints leading right from that abandoned house.
Did they go in the house? Did anybody go in the house, Charnell?
Well, to my knowledge, no. It was never made part of the investigation. It's not printed in the newspapers that I could find.
There's just no info on it.
I do not know. For all we know, Megan, yes, they did. And yes, that's where that child was murdered.
But we don't know.
And they know they've already messed up, but they don't have any other leads. Finding where the child was murdered at doesn't necessarily lead them to the killer.
No, because it was abandoned.
Yeah, it was an abandoned house. Yep. So the Mr. and Mrs. Gill did move their other children as well out of Bradford, but Mrs. Gill regularly visited her son's grave until her death, which came more than 50 years later after her child.
She lived a pretty long life for that time frame.
Yep. John's murder has never been solved. There is a lot of questions, like why did he leave the car early? Was he leaving early to get breakfast? Had someone spoken to him prior to and was like, "Hey, meet me at 8:30 and we'll have this sweets breakfast that was found in his stomach."
Currents.
Right?
Yeah.
And is that why? So when he tells William Barrett, "I'm leaving for breakfast," William Barrett maybe just assumed that meant at home, but really he was meeting this person.
And his parents didn't have a good answer for that at trial either.
No. I think that his parents didn't want to sound like bad parents that didn't worry about their son until 3:00 in the afternoon. But in their defense,
I understand.
He didn't regularly come home for breakfast. He hung out with William Barrett most of the day, and he didn't have school. He was on holiday. So, I just think that they were worried. I mean, look at how much scrutiny is going on in the time. So I think they were worried about why, being questioned of why weren't you even worried when he didn't show up for breakfast? You didn't even start looking for him until 3 p.m. Some other questions are, why was blood found only on his collar and cap?
Yeah, that bothers me too. Can I speculate? Did you say that some of his trigger alert entrails were wrapped around his head and neck?
Yeah.
So there's seeping that can occur, and maybe we need a medical expert. But if they redressed him, this person did, and then wrapped his entrails around the top, it's very possible that would make sense. Those are the two pieces of clothing that were touching a body part or an organ.
Yeah, it could have been. Except it seemed as though everything was washed. I mean, maybe they didn't get all of the blood, though.
Yeah, that's true. And who knows that it would have been seeping blood either. It could have been other type of fluids.
Yeah.
So they're sorry for grossing everybody out.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, but that's how you have to critically look at things in situations like this. Where was he kept between the time of his abduction and the time that he was killed? Possibly more than a day later. And how did they keep him quiet?
Abandoned shed.
Yeah, that's what
a few feet from the scene with the footprints.
Yep.
Thrown it up there.
And like we had already speculated before, was this a random act, or had this killer lied in wait, watched people's routines? I think that he was absolutely targeted. I think that it was all a part of it from the moment that the police and the newspapers started receiving those letters prior to his death. I think that this child was picked out and targeted.
Yeah, he made for a good victim.
Mm-hmm. Also, if this killer is local, there were no other similar crimes in the area at all.
Which just goes back to the Jack the Ripper thing about how I'm heading north.
It does. And also, though, because we have shoddy police investigative, skills here, why are we not interviewing potential witnesses to say, did you see anyone new around town? This is a small town. People notice new faces. Where were those interviews?
Well, if they exist, we don't have them.
Right. Yes. And then the last thing is, we think we've got a Jack the Ripper copycat, possibly Jack the Ripper. I don't know. I'm leaning more towards copycat because of the differences. But also, who was W. Mason and why was his newspaper found wrapped around the body? Yes. These are our unanswered questions for this case.
We think the person exists, that W. Mason, and they just never found him.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't find him at the address that the newspaper was addressed to.
Don't you want to know what they did find there? What was the address?
Well, or I'm going to say this. Do they just say that they went and tried to find this person? Think about that, Megan. Maybe they didn't even really follow up with that. We don't know, because this time, it's not like today when we've got shoddy police investigative work today, and podcasts have become a part of this too, of reopening cases, right? Getting the information going. That wasn't a thing in 1888.
No, case closed.
Yeah. And you no longer, out of sight, out of mind, and we no longer bring it up, and we don't question those in authority.
No, not unless they were to have ever found, and some people think that they did, and we don't know, but found the Ripper or this person later, and they would have confessed. So that's when you got your jailhouse or deathbed confessions.
Right.
And that, to our knowledge, has not occurred in this case either.
Nope.
Really interesting case, Charnell.
Right?
Yeah.
I stumbled upon it. I mean, for everyone who has suggested cases to us, please keep suggesting them. I do have a list. I really am going down them, but every once in a while something triggers me and I have to I get my own pick. And this was one of them where I was actually looking up information on a different case, found this, and was like, after these several deep dives that we did the last, I don't know, 6 episodes or something.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
Yeah, have been entrenched in deep dives. I needed something just a little bit different, but also intriguing. I find the Jack the Ripper stuff, what little I do know about it, I do find it very intriguing. It's just...
That is a deep, deep dive on Jack the Ripper. And we're talking almost mini-series level here, 6 episodes probably.
Right.
But what would be really interesting is if people are aware, if listeners have other copycat Jack the Ripper type stories.
Yeah. I'd love to
continue to cover those.
Me too. Yep, me too.
So send those in if you guys know of any.
Yeah, because like I said, there is so much coverage out there about Jack the Ripper that this stuff is more intriguing to me even than that, because you can just find it everywhere. It's like Jeffrey Dahmer. Like,
are you watching it right now?
Not yet.
I haven't started it either, but I heard it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. And I just feel like there's just not a whole lot new that we could teach the world about it, other than them hearing our perspectives, which are probably very similar to that of a lot of the rest of the world.
I would think so, but maybe with more F-bombs and inappropriate humor.
Yes, exactly. So...
Are you going to bathe me from this poor little fella?
I am ready to bathe you. And you guys, I have quite a treat for us today. Oh. I felt like with such a gnarly case, we needed to have just a real treat of a brain bath. And so I have found for you the duct tape bandit.
Duct tape?
The duct tape bandit. Yep. I will post a picture. This man literally took duct tape, wrapped it around his face, no buffer in between.
Oh my God.
Straight duct tape to the skin and hair, all the way around, mummified style.
I was just saying, like a mummy?
Mm-hmm.
Good God, that's going to hurt.
Only on his face, though, leaving just his eyes and his lips. But he appears to have gotten some on his lips, Megan, as you can see, because his lips are bleeding.
He's going to be missing an eyebrow, too.
Oh, yeah. That's right. He left one half of one eyebrow unscathed from the duct tape, and the other one clearly, and his eyelashes on that second eye are going to be waxed right off.
Why did he do this?
Oh, he was going to rob a place. All right, an Ashland, Kentucky man was accused of being the duct tape bandit, and he's gotten himself into a sticky situation. The man, who had his head wrapped in duct tape to conceal his identity, walked into a liquor store on Friday, Ashland police said. So just so you guys know, this is from the Denver Post that I'm reading this from. Shamrock liquor store manager Bill Steele had some duct tape of his own, but his was wrapped around a wooden club that sent the robber fleeing.
I love it.
I know. Store employee Craig Miller said he chased the man into the parking lot, tackled him, and held him in a chokehold until the police arrived.
I would have just started ripping his tape off.
Yes. A customer also helped, the police said. Good. So this man's name is Casey G. KZ.
Sounds like Casey. Casey.
It's Casey Casey.
Oh, my.
Guys, this man was doomed from birth. His name is spelled Casey, Kasey, and then his last name is Kazee.
Well, the fact that they spelled his first name like that gives me a lot of knowledge.
He was 24 at the time of Ashland, Kentucky, was charged with first-degree robbery. And in an interview with a TV station, this is my favorite, y'all, he denied that he was the bandit who robbed the store of 2 rolls of change. That's all he got.
Oh, God.
And he
He's got more than that on the duct tape.
He did. He pleaded not guilty, and his bond was set at $250,000. But his quote to this TV station was, "Do the homework. Do the math. I ain't no duct tape bandit."
That's priceless.
And someone made a rap song about it.
Oh, my God.
And I have it.
You're going to play it?
Yes. And it'll be, the link to the YouTube video will be in my show notes. It's on YouTube. It's called Casey KZ, No Duct Tape Bandit. Okay?
Does it tell the whole story?
Not No Duct Tape Bandit.
I'm not no duct tape bandit.
Exactly. We got to rap. Are you ready to rap with
I am
me?
ready to rap.
Here it goes. I'm going to hit play here. Come on, baby.
I look like a duct tape bandit, baby. Tape bandit, baby. Tape bandit, baby. Tape bandit. Do the math, do the homework, man. You know this is not me. Duct tape? I'm not no duct tape bandit. You hear me? I'm not no duct tape bandit.
It's catchy.
I'm not no
I'm
duct
digging
tape
it.
bandit. You hear me? I'm not no duct tape bandit. Now look, live one-on-one, Ashton, Kentucky. You know this is not me. Now look, I look like a duct tape bandit, baby.
That's really him.
I'm not no duct tape bandit. You hear me? I'm not no duct tape bandit. I'm not no duct tape bandit. You hear me? I'm not no duct tape bandit. Now look, do the math, do the homework. Now look.
Police say Kazee did this to himself, wrapping his head in duct tape to conceal his face.
Now look.
I mean, he probably had every opportunity to put a brown paper poke over his head and poke holes in it for a plastic bag, you know? But duct tape?
Now look.
Duct
you know
tape?
This is not me.
Fortunately, Steele had his own duct tape attached to a wooden club.
I'm not no duct tape bandit. You hear me? I'm not no duct tape bandit.
You hear me?
I'm not no duct tape bandit. You hear me? I'm not no duct tape bandit. Now look.
He says police have the wrong man, despite the police pictures that might suggest otherwise.
Look at me. I look.
The only thing that was missing from that is someone going, somewhere in the background of that song.
I feel like there needs to be a video to go with
I
this.
know.
They're showing pictures just of him, like
Yes.
the crime. Yeah.
Yeah, in his jumper, his jail jumper
I
and
love
whatnot.
love when people do this and they take the actual statements and set it to a rap like that. That is fantastic.
Do the math.
Do the homework.
I'm
I am
not
no duct tape bandit.
baby.
You hear me?
You hear me? Then as it goes on, there's somebody in the background that just all of a sudden goes, duct tape. It is the best. Also super catchy, and I feel like it should be our intro.
You do realize I'm going to sing that the rest of the week.
Oh, I know.
I'm going to be in my car going, I'm not no duct tape bandit.
It's got such a catchy tune, though. Like, my ass was starting to shake to the beat.
Mine's my shoulders.
It was good,
and my
yes.
chin. It's going.
I'm not no duct tape bandit.
I want
Meaning-
to, whoever this YouTuber is that created this, I know you're going to post the link, but
yes, they are geniuses.
I'm a fan. I'm
yep.
a fan. And I kind of want him to do that with some other arrests.
For sure. Can we have more of this? It's Soza is the YouTube handle on them. Soza. Yep. So I will post that link, you guys. That was probably my most favorite brain bath that I've ever done because I got to accompany it with a rap song.
Yeah, it doesn't get better than that.
It doesn't. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that too. And keep it curious. Keep sticking around for more cases that we'll bring you. If you have case suggestions, send them to crimecurious@yahoo.com. You could also go to our website. I realize that I never plug our website. It literally is crimecuriouspodcast.com.
Oh,
you can
easy.
listen to episodes from there. You can email me from there. Whatever. You can see pictures. Meg, we got to get a picture of you up there.
Oh, we do need a
You're
picture.
a part of the business.
Okay.
now.
Well, I'll get my headshots done.
I think. Well, my husband is a photographer. So
Excellent. But this
could
time,
probably do that.
I'm not trusting that. Can I wear clothes?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if he's interested then.
We'll figure something out.
Yeah. We'll Photoshop some onto you. It's fine.
Oh, great.
Oh, God. All right. And if you would like more of us, feel free to join Patreon, Crime Curious, patreon.com. It's actually, it's patreon.com/Crime Curious.
It is.
It's also, the link is in the show notes of this episode as well, too. So you can just click that. We've got lots of binge-worthy content on there. Our top tier Patreons get all kinds of extra content for the month, too. We've been giving them some juicy minis.
And a doozy of a brain bath Bath only episode. God love all of you if you go and join and just listen to that.
Yeah,
Keep listening, by the way, to us. Even if you do listen to that first, please don't judge us. It's going to be funny, but there's no actual investigatory work done in it.
No. This month's Brain Bath only episode for September was Megan, Jason, and Charnell, and it was boy, that train derailed.
It is a rabbit hole of dream fun.
It is. People seem to really enjoy it, though. So if you're interested, you could just join for that if you'd like. But all right, until next time, everyone. We hope you have a fantastic freaking rest of your day. And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.